Hi there, this is Adam Eason. I'm here to try out a new series idea I've had. It's called Piecemeal, and I'll be taking phrases from different compositions and breaking them down with an eye towards how they're constructed compositionally. I won't be doing really a music theory analysis, that's not what this is about, but I will still be using music theory concepts to help describe what's going on. So if you don't have a good basic music theory background, these videos, you might still get something out of them, but they're probably not for you. For my first video, I'm going to take a look at a phrase from Clara Schumann's Opus 13, number 1, Ich stand in dunklen Traumen. This is a lead, a song for soprano voice and piano, and I'll just be breaking this down bit by bit starting with the melody. All right, let's check out what's there. Okay, taking a look at the melody, we are in the key of E flat major. She starts us on the third scale degree, the third being G. In this first bar, she repeats that G a few times and then moves up by step. And with ears that are kind of soaked into tonal music, we're really expecting a B flat to come after this A natural. We do get that B flat, but only after she makes a little bit of a leap up and then stepping back down from that leap to the C. We then have a big leap up to an E flat, a leap of a fourth. And then what is very common in classical European music, if there's a big vocal leap like this, it tends to be followed by some kind of filler taking us back in the opposite direction. At this point, you would think, okay, this would make a good resting place, a good stopping point. A lot of music happens in 4-bar phrases for European music, and we're at the 4th bar, so you'd think, all right, this is where a cadence is. But instead, she chooses to elongate this cadence with an even larger leap, a big octave leap, filling in a turn. And that pattern of having a big vocal leap up and then filling down, she does do that, but with a rather more ornate figuration. There's a bit of a scale, G, F, E flat, D, C, right here, but she includes some extra figurations just to make things a little bit more unpredictable, a little bit more graceful. At this point, the end of measure 5, the voice part joins in. It starts doubled with the piano. You can see these are exactly the same notes all the way up through here. And then right here diverges. Instead of making the leap up to the E flat with the keyboard, the voice part drops down a step. This actually happens at an interesting moment for the text. The word that is set on these two notes, starte, basically means staring. And this is the poet, the speaker, staring at the image of their beloved. So this separation between the music helps musically depict the separation between the speaker of the text and the object of the text. Otherwise, they rejoin pretty quickly at the end of the phrase and then steps back down, just like we see at the end of measure 3 and to the beginning of measure 4. Adding in the bass now, in tonal music, the bass has an important role for helping orient us towards a particular pitch of the scale. In this case, E flat major, so naturally E flat is of primary importance to the tonal composers. So we start on E flat. That's not always the case, but for now, it looks like that's where she wanted to be. In this case, the bass is repeating this pulsing eighth note rhythm, steps down a scale degree, steps down a scale degree, steps up, and then from here to the end outlines a scale, an ascending scale all the way up. Over here, even though there's a big leap down here, if I just transpose that up an octave, you can see she's just continuing that scale in a different register. In this case, that's done to make more room for the harmony in between the melody and the bass. So it's just a matter of keeping that space in the texture. What's curious about how the bass relates to the melody is every time the melody starts to move up, the bass moves down. So in this case, we have the melody moving up from G to C and B flat, moving up to E flat, and the bass is moving down across that whole section. As the melody moves down from this E flat to the G, the bass begins moving up. There is a big skip here, but again, you can kind of imagine if this were down an octave, it's still generally descending. So those two parts, the ascending voice and the descending bass, or descending voice with ascending bass, that is a very common way of crafting things to maintain some amount of shape and interest and direction. That way the bass isn't just following right along with whatever the voice is doing at any particular time. Also in the bass, there's one more interesting little wrinkle. It's this F sharp stepping up from the F. This will become more relevant as we look more at the interior of the harmonies. So just keep your eyes on it because you'll see something similar in just a second. Now with the melody and bass in place, let's take a listen to what we have to hear how those two parts interact to create the outer pieces of the texture. Now let's start filling in the harmony in between those two outer layers. A lot of music theory analysis is about looking at which chords are used when and what kind of chords they are. In this case, I'm actually going to just look at how the harmony is used to support either the melody or the bass. At the beginning, you can see I've chosen to use two voices, even though this is just a single E flat in the score. And I think it's useful because it helps to look at how this little bit down here grows out of a harmonization of the melody. In classical European music, we harmonize mostly in thirds, and that's what we've got. We've got a third between the bass and the melody. As the melody ascends, this voice rises out of the bass and harmonizes in thirds here. This G flat then steps back down to an F, and instead of harmonizing in thirds with the melody, it's harmonizing in thirds with the bass. I guess you could call this the tenor voice. The alto voice here harmonizes in sixths, the inversion of the third, another really important interval for European harmony. And it just follows right along. As the melody ascends, it ascends with it. And it's moving up in half steps, just like the soprano voice. Once it hits here, it's supporting that soprano voice with octaves. And you can see it just follows right along with octaves, right up until here, where it's used more as a filler of the chord. After this point, we have an interesting moment where it's stepping up. This is still the alto voice, stepping up, G, A flat, A, mirroring this rising figure in the beginning of the melody. And the bass supporting that, again harmonizing now with this melodic bit. But instead of being a G natural that falls back down to an F, she's using that as an F sharp, climbing to the G. After this, the bass is providing that ubiquitous 4-5-1 cadence, and she's filling in a number of these chords. One other point of note are some pretty spicy dissonances. In this case, we have the F sharp in the bass played against an F natural in the melody, which is a pretty poignant sound. We heard that earlier. As we move over, we hear another, these are called cross relations, by the way. We hear another cross relation. We have a B flat against a B natural. Same letter, different accidental. They're pretty spicy. After this, we hear another pretty spicy dissonance with the major seventh, E flat and D. Another dissonance here, G against A flat. Moving on, it's basically a repetition of the first 4 bars. All right, now we've got some of the filler. On this pass, I've actually got the bass muted so that you can hear in particular how this first bar is all just one harmonization of the melody line. One other interesting point of note, a lot of voice music doubles with some instrument or another. This helps the vocalist with centering their pitch and intonation so they're not just thrown off into space with nothing to relate to. In this case, that A flat does have vocal support with A flats in the tenor line. And as we come up to the rest of the harmony filler, you'll see there's actually a doubling at that same pitch. So this A flat is still being supported by the keyboard once we get the rest of the notes in. Finally, we're adding in the last of the harmonic glue. There are a lot of octave doublings that are happening on the interior of the voices. Right here, we've got an octave doubling of the bass. Here, instead, it moves up and starts doubling that tenor voice. Again, still doubling the tenor. And that kind of thing just adds a little bit of extra thickening to the chords and thickening to the texture. It's probably not super noticeable from the MIDI recording, but it would definitely be noticeable with a full grand piano, that there'd be this extra layer of luminescent kind of something to the sound of these chords, which is added by those doublings. All right, let's go ahead and listen with that final doubling in place. It's just a little extra thickener. Can I just take a moment to say how much I despise this MIDI voice? Like, oh my gosh, it is so bad. Sorry about that. I'll figure out what I can do for better audio quality in the future, but for now, this is what I got. All right, that's all I've got for today. As far as phrases go, this is fairly simple, but there are a lot of interesting little dissonances that happen in there that make a lot of sense when you consider them as harmonizations of the melody rather than as individual chords. I also like that there's just a really clear contrasting motion between the melody and the bass line, which creates a nice shape to the whole thing. That's something which is really easy to overlook. It's easy to be like, okay, chord, 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 chord. Well, okay, fine. How does the bass relate to your melody? And how do those parts interact to create tension and release in terms of their direction? Okay, well, hopefully you enjoyed this and learned something. I've got a lot of different melodies and phrases that I'd like to look at in this way. So if you found this enjoyable, go ahead and click the subscribe button and leave a comment about phrases maybe that you'd like to hear in the future, and for me to kind of break down in this way so you can see, again, more of a compositional construction sort of thing. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. I'll see you next time.